because you think you're doing the right thing, but then obviously you're not doing the right thing. You were like, oh, it's huge, it's excessive, it's dangerously fast. I'm a Hummer EV fan. Hello, my name is Alanis King, and this right here is a GMC Hummer EV Edition 1. This electric super truck has 1,000 horsepower, a 0 to 60 time of 3 seconds despite weighing 9,000 pounds, the ability to crab walk, and a mode called WTF. This truck is a topic of conversation, whether you're admiring it or arguing about it, and I cannot wait to show it to you today. But first, I should tell you, this Hummer EV is now available on Cars and Bids. You can check out more photos, see the full spec list, or maybe even bid on it at the link in the description of this video. Before we get to this Hummer EV, I want to do two things. First, I want to thank the Petrol Lounge for letting me film inside in their facility. Not only is this so much better than just sitting in a parking lot, but we also have a ton of fun every time I'm here, so it's just such a joy. The Petrol Lounge is a car storage facility in Austin, Texas, and they have the coolest cars back there. And we just brought the Hummer EV in to film it. And second, I want to talk about the Hummer brand as a whole. This electric super truck is a modern version of the Hummer, which traces its roots back to military vehicles. Back in 1983, AM General got a $1.2 billion contract to produce Hummer-like vehicles that acted as U.S. military command centers, troop carriers, and ambulances. People called them Humvees, and they could climb steps, go up 60% grades, and ford 30 inches of water. A decade later, in 1992, AM General brought the Hummer to civilians. This vehicle would be known as the Hummer H1, and it was huge and got about 10 miles per gallon. But what it wasn't was a huge seller. In 14 years on the market, about 12,000 were sold. Another decade later, in 2002, after General Motors acquired the Hummer brand, GM debuted the H2, which was a cheaper version of the Hummer. This H2 could ford 20 inches of water, climb over small steps, and tow 7,000 pounds. And in 2005, GM added a pickup version of this truck. In 2006 came the Hummer H3, which was smaller and cheaper than both the H1 and H2. It also had a pickup version, and it got about 15 miles per gallon combined. But you might remember, a few years later, General Motors and the economy were not doing so hot. General Motors killed the Hummer brand in 2010, which was just 11 years after they acquired it. And Hummers quickly became a metaphor for a time when gas and life were much cheaper and everything was more carefree and not dimmed by the recession. I distinctly remember seeing Hummers post-recession and thinking about how excessive they were, like, that's a lot. And I think the recession just made us all so aware of our own financial instability. Even though I was only a teenager at the time, I could still see it. The Hummer name stayed dormant for a decade until 2020, when General Motors announced that it would come back as an electric super truck under the GMC brand. GMC announced that it would have 1,000 horsepower, 11,500 pound-feet of torque, 329 miles of range, a towing capacity of 7,500 pounds, CrabWalk mode, and a launch control called Watts to Freedom. That's WTF for short. No, I did not misspeak when I said GMC advertised this with 11,500 pound-feet of torque. But GMC kind of did. Before we break down how, let me tell you some torque numbers on other cars. The Rimac Navara has 1,914 horsepower and 1,741 pound-feet of torque. The Lotus Avaya has about 2,000 horsepower and 1,254 pound-feet of torque. The Bugatti Divo has 1,500 horsepower and 1,180 pound-feet of torque. And the Koenigsegg Jesko has 1,280 horsepower and 1,106 pound-feet of torque. Did you notice how all of those are in the 1,000 range and this is in the 11,000 range? It sounds completely ridiculous, and it created a lot of buzz when this truck debuted. That was the idea, but it wasn't exactly accurate. My dear friend Jason Finsky of Engineering Explained made a whole video about this a few years ago, and basically the discrepancy comes in how they measured it. So the 11,500 number is the measurement of wheel torque, but the industry standard for advertising torque is engine torque or motor torque. So Jason took all these numbers and solved for X and did his math thing, and he estimated that if you were to use the industry standard motor torque, this has about 1,000. GMC claimed that WTF mode could take the Hummer EV from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 3 seconds, which is terrifying because this vehicle weighs 9,000 pounds. That is a lot of weight going really fast at your command. It's scary, basically. GMC also said the first Hummer EVs would be called the Edition 1s and that they would start at about $112,000. That brings us to this car, the GMC Hummer EV Edition 1. This truck has 1,000 horsepower, 11,500 pound-feet of torque, all-wheel drive, four-wheel steer, and funky modes like CrabWalk and Watts to Freedom. This particular truck also has an off-road accessory package that was an option, and in total, when new, this cost almost $116,000. It's really hard not to just state the obvious when I'm talking about this car. It's massive and it's extremely powerful, and there's this very interesting juxtaposition with this car, which is that on one side, it is an electric vehicle. It uses this technology that's supposed to be new and better and more efficient for the earth. But on the other side of that, it embodies the same massive excessiveness of those Hummers that we saw so much pre-recession. It's a really interesting side-by-side comparison there. For me, I try to see the positives in this car. It is pretty impressive when it comes to modern engineering. I mean, not only do we have that super cool CrabWalk mode, it has this really tight turning radius. It's so fast. The launch control is nuts. But I also understand the other side of it, where some people cannot justify the coolness of it with the excessiveness. All right, I am indoors. I am in a safe location. And I am gonna close this trunk on myself. Gotta get this out first. I think I can fit. I think we can close it. I feel like this is fine. Here we go. Ah! Okay, this is not that scary. There's a light in here. Oh, the light went out. Okay. The light's on. One Alanis! Welcome inside the Hummer EV, which is quite literally so large that my tripod for my camera does not go over the door. This vehicle is honestly such a statement vehicle when you get inside of it. When I got inside of it earlier to drive it over here, I was so deeply impressed. This feels like such a simple and clean and usable interior where you can just wipe everything down and shake everything out and put it all back in to go on your next adventure. But at the same time, it does not feel cheap and it does not feel neglected for the purpose of usability. Sometimes when you get in a vehicle that's meant to be a usable vehicle, you get in and it feels kind of cheap. It feels kind of plasticky and dull, and there's just a lot of black plastic everywhere, and it's boring. You get inside this vehicle and it is black, white, and shiny bronze, and it's stunning. None of these materials to me scream cheap. Now, maybe if I was with them a little longer, like I could tap them and do whatever, but the color scheme, the texture, and the materials just look so nice. This is a statement interior. It's like wearing a statement necklace with your outfit. You get in here and you go, wow, this is pretty cool looking. And then you look up and you continue the usability theme with these roof panels that are blue glass. This vehicle is so impressive. I know what you're thinking. I know when this car debuted, you were like, oh, it's huge, it's excessive, it's dangerously fast. But you get in here, and this is a luxury vehicle. This is a very special vehicle. This is a unique vehicle. You don't get in a lot of vehicles like this, and I drive a lot of vehicles. I would say my one complaint I have noticed so far in this car is that the infotainment screen and the controls take a lot of getting used to. When you want to put it in CrabWalk or Watts to Freedom mode or whatever, it comes up with this beautiful display on the screen and does all this cool stuff. But it doesn't always go into those modes, and it's kind of confusing what the procedure for going into those modes is, because you think you're doing the right thing, but then obviously you're not doing the right thing because it's not in the mode yet. That's a little confusing. The screen is very, very detailed. Lots of menus, lots of depth to it. And so when you're trying to find certain things, like how do I spray off the off-road camera underneath the car and all that, sometimes it takes quite a while to find it, even when you look up the tutorial. Like I went on the GMC website and searched, how do I spray off the off-road camera that's under the vehicle? And it told me how, and I still didn't know how. So there are bits of that. I would say the controls are not the most intuitive in here. But if you drove it for a period of time, you would be fine. You would learn how to use it. I'm a Hummer EV fan. Now we have moved to the back of the Hummer EV. The back isn't as amazing as the front, but the back is still good. I would say I would actually prefer stadium seating. So a lot of modern SUVs and some older SUVs and trucks and stuff like that, they have stadium seating. So the back seats sit higher than the front seats. So the people in the back get a better view. And I think this vehicle could really benefit from that. The inside of this vehicle is so large that I don't feel cramped at all back here. I mean, I would almost feel like I have too much space back here. I have room to spread out my legs and do whatever I want. I have climate controls. I have charging. It's nice back here. And one of my favorite parts of the back is that, you know, you have your normal cup holders and stuff right here, but then you have in-seat storage. So I can pull my seat open like this and it comes out, and there's enough storage in here for like a piece of paper and some pens. I don't really know. If you were trying to hide something from someone, this would be a good place to hide it, but I don't know that it's a good place to just store things, because you can't fit a lot in here. Welcome inside the Hummer EV. And let me just start by telling you how I am seated to drive this vehicle. So this vehicle is so large that when you get in it, you feel small. And because you feel small, you want to lift the seat up and forward as much as possible. At least I do. And so I have the seat so tall. Okay, it goes a little taller, but I am way up here because I feel like in this vehicle, I'm just so large in this vehicle that I have to be taller. I have to be able to see so that I know what I'm doing, because there's a lot under my hands. I have a lot of responsibility here. This car is very quiet on the highway. I have a little bit of wind noise up here. I don't have much road noise at all, and really the car feels so smooth on the highway. I mean, I guess when you're this big, you can just like absorb everything anyway. I guess you don't really need to have that great a ride quality, but it's fantastic. Oh my goodness, the ride quality is great. It feels very, very luxurious. I feel like I can see everything. Honestly, the size of the vehicle is not super burdensome when you're on the highway. I also don't find that it's super burdensome when you're on smaller streets or anything like that either. You get used to the size of this vehicle very quickly. I feel like most people just get used to the size of vehicles very quickly. You're either in a very small vehicle or a very big vehicle, you know, and it's easy to get used to. The highest setting of regen is very jerky in here. You go like this on regenerative braking. You can lower the regenerative braking, you can turn the regenerative braking off in vehicles, but the highest setting in this car is quite strong, and it's not as smooth as I would want it to be, but it gets the job done. It will stop this extremely large vehicle. And overall, I mean, this is just a comfortable vehicle to drive. Once you get used to the sheer size of it, it's not bad to drive. Also, a thing that's weird about the Hummer EV is that you just constantly expect everyone to be looking at you, and you also expect everyone to assume that you're a bad driver because you're in a Hummer EV. And so you're really, really aware of all of your moves you make while driving, because you're like, oh, I don't want everyone to think I'm the worst driver in the world, but also sometimes you gotta make moves, you know? And you just gotta deal with it. And they're gonna go, oh, there's that Hummer. And you're gonna go, yep, sorry, had to make that move. The vehicle responds well to turning inputs, but it's also that relaxed steering feel where if I turn it a little bit, it's gonna smoothly glide that way, right? The steering isn't super heavy. It's definitely there. It's not light as air, but also you're not kind of like picking up the wheel to move it this way. It's a comfortable steering feel for what this vehicle is. I also just love one pedal driving in EVs. You get used to it so quickly, and it's so nice to rest your left foot while your right foot does all of the work. One pedal driving is such a fantastic invention. It's just so relaxing, especially when you're in traffic. Like right now, I am in a bunch of traffic because I always end up driving vehicles in city centers. I'm in a ton of traffic, and all I have to do is one pedal drive, let the car come to a stop, and just put my foot down, and both of my feet are just resting on the floorboard. I do not have to sit here on the brake. Now, I do have to turn the wheel quite far to get the car to turn in a normal setting. So if I'm at a stoplight and I want to turn right, I have to turn the wheel quite far. If you're the kind of person who likes to keep both hands on the wheel and go full lock, which I am that kind of person, if you're like that kind of person, you won't be able to do that all the time in this vehicle. You're gonna have to take your hand off the wheel occasionally. Something I've noticed about regenerative braking in this vehicle is that the regenerative braking is so immediate that I'm thinking about the regen while I'm accelerating. And I don't usually feel that in other cars. Maybe I just have like very keen awareness right now. I'm not sure. Maybe it's the Hummer EV in particular. But I do feel like I'm kind of pushing against the regenerative braking by keeping my foot on the gas, right? It's a very hard thing to describe, but I feel like I'm trying to prevent the regen in some ways in this vehicle, and I don't really know why I'm getting that feeling as opposed to other electric cars. I think it might just be because when I got in here the first time, the regen was so strong that I'm like, okay, I need to make sure I don't lift all the way up and just go, but I don't really know. I was not expecting to enjoy the Hummer EV as much as I have, and I was not expecting to like it as much as I have. When you look at the Hummer EV on paper, it seems like excess. It seems ridiculous. It seems like something no one needs. But when you actually drive it and you see how well done and refined this interior is, and also how nicely it drives on the highway, it's nice and cushy. When you're in this car and you're actually driving it, you feel a sort of appreciation for it and a sort of connection to it. I feel like if I were in the market for an electric truck, I wouldn't say no to this one. I really wouldn't. It's a good truck. Still very fast. Wow. Very, very fast. I mean, what a vehicle. I was not expecting to feel this way about this vehicle at the end of the day. And now I get it. You can have issues with certain parts of it, but I think as a whole, it's kind of hard to dislike. It's good. I like it. I like the Hummer EV. I'm a fan of the Hummer EV. So that was the 2022 GMC Hummer EV. If you were standing right here, I'd ask you how you felt about it after seeing it in action. But you're not, so all I can do is ask you through the camera. Let me know in the comments and I'll try to respond to you. And if you want to do more than just talk about this Hummer EV, it is now available on Cars and Bids. You can check out more photos, see the full spec list, or maybe even bid on it at the link in the description of this video. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.